there doesn't seem to be any urgency to change anything. You'd think possibly with the mayors of New York and Washington begging Biden for help, that there'd be some instance that, hey, maybe what we're doing on the southern border is wrong. But no, basically he told New York and DC, fend for yourselves, you should be able to do fine. We're having no change in policy, full speed ahead.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story is going next. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by commentary editor Conn Carroll. Conn, we may see a rematch between President Biden and former President Trump in 2024, but there's one area at least where people would prefer, at least based on polling, to see Trump back, or at least Trump's policies back. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is a poll from a surprising source, National Public Radio, NPR. This is a liberal outlet. You wouldn't expect to see a poll like this. But what the poll found is that a majority of Americans, 54% of Americans, believe there's an invasion happening on our southern border, which is quite a title to attach to it. But even more importantly, when they asked how people wanted to address the situation, the invasion, the crisis at the border, they said that they would prefer to have migrants wait in Mexico to have their asylum cases resolved instead of letting them into the United States.
Right.
Now, the poll did not use Trump's name, okay?
Sure.
But that is the exact policy Trump enacted in 2019 in order to solve the border crisis that was happening at that time. So even though this poll didn't use Trump's name, it specifically identified his policy and it was the most popular policy in the entire poll as far as what voters wanted to solve the immigration crisis.
And so the southern border has been a simmering crisis really throughout Biden's presidency. Immigration and border control is one of the areas where he has some of the lowest job approval ratings of any issue. That was true even before his job approval ratings began to decline more broadly. Doesn't really seem to be a lot of urgency, though, to change anything on their approach.
No, not at all. More to your point, up before the Afghanistan withdrawal, Biden was doing great in pretty much every area but immigration. He's always been doing terrible there from the beginning. But there doesn't seem to be any urgency to change anything. You'd think possibly with the mayors of New York and Washington begging Biden for help, that there'd be some instance that, hey, maybe what we're doing on the southern border is wrong. But no, basically he told New York and DC, fend for yourselves, you should be able to do fine. We're having no change in policy, full speed ahead.
So President Biden has announced a new policy. He's announced his student loan forgiveness plan. This has been something that's been long anticipated. It's finally come around. Washington Examiner took a pretty strong stand against it editorially. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we called it illegal, immoral, and inflationary. The inflationary part's easy. You're basically giving away money to these people who've graduated college.
Right.
The immoral part, because it encourages people to borrow more, which is risky. It encourages colleges to raise tuition, which is bad. So it's kind of like a moral hazard. But the interesting part is the illegal part, because Nancy Pelosi had said months ago that Biden didn't have the authority to do this. Biden had said previously he didn't have the authority to do this, and now all of a sudden they're going to go ahead and do it. It reminds me a lot of, going back to immigration, of DACA. For months, Obama said he didn't have the authority to grant amnesty to this one group of immigrants, and then of course in an election year, we're in an election year again, he ultimately did. And so it'll be interesting to see if anybody comes forward and sues to stop what is clearly an illegal act by Biden.
Right, so you mentioned the illegal aspect of this, and there are precedents with the eviction moratorium, some of the COVID vaccine mandates the Biden administration tried to do. But there is a concern in terms of challenging this legally that didn't necessarily apply in some of those other cases about whether anyone would have the standing to actually challenge this in court.
Yeah, so it's kind of a esoteric topic in the legal world. But in order to bring any type of suit to stop any type of action, you have to have standing. You have to show personal harm. So with the eviction moratorium, if you're a landlord and someone's not paying you rent, you're clearly being harmed by that. So you have standing there. If for the vax mandate, if you're someone who doesn't want to get vaccinated, and your employer is saying you're fired unless you don't, clearly there's harm there. But with this, the harm courts see is so diffuse, because this $300 billion might cause inflationary harm or might raise our taxes, where else, but that affects everyone equally. So no one person has been harmed specifically to come forward and assert a claim in court. And because there's no specificity there, no one's going to have standing, and so it's unclear whether or not this Biden action will be able to be challenged.
Now, there are some people who, or maybe they're being a little cynical, but have theorized that the perfect outcome for Biden is that he gets credit for trying to do this. The ultra MAGA Supreme Court strikes him down. He gets to say he attempted at least to fulfill a campaign promise, run against the Supreme Court that also has overturned Roe versus Wade, campaign against that in the fall, but not do anything that makes inflation worse before the election. Any possibility of that?
No, I don't think courts move that fast. I mean, look at Obama and DACA. It took a number of years, a couple of years, before Texas was able to get standing and put the halt on that, at least temporarily. So it's not something where someone's going to be able to come forward and sue and stop this before November.
Thank you, Conn.
Yep.
You could read Conn and the rest of our commentary team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.